Ladies and gentlemen, three kings, so ready to share our experiences following any kind of paranormal recipe or ritual. Today we have a very special guest. She's someone who has not necessarily gone through particular rituals, or maybe she has. We're about to find out. But when we spoke to her before the show began, there is a number of very interesting stories that I think we're going to enjoy listening to tonight. And as always, my hope is to generate discussion. So if anybody is watching, please feel free to post in the Twitch chat. Any questions that you type, we'll pass them to our guest. So the person who is going to introduce our guest tonight is my co-host, Dapper Jabber. How are you doing, Dapper?
I'm doing real good tonight.
All right. So who do you have for us today, Dapper?
This is my wonderful wife, TJ. We've been together for a long, long time now. And over those years, she's given me a lot of very peculiar anecdotes about the supernatural and things that aren't of this world. And I thought it'd be perfect content for the topic of the show.
I absolutely appreciate it, Dapper. And I have heard a few of those stories, and actually, I think that's the one I'm gonna begin. But let's please put it on the headset first, so we can say hello, and then I'll jump into
All
my
right.
anecdote story.
I will get her on, and I'll be back here whenever you need me. Unfortunately, until we get our technology fixed, this is all we have.
All we
One
need is
moment.
the Twitch money, guys. Just
All
donate
right.
and buy a headphone for Dapper.
My lumpy ass chair. All right, good.
Let me get this headset adjusted here.
Get some water.
Okay, I'm here.
Hello,
Kind of.
TJ. Hello, how are you?
I'm all right. Trying to get the headset adjusted so I can
That's all
work.
right. Thank you so much for joining us. What I thought of starting the stream with was the little personal anecdote that we have. I'll say it myself because I don't want to give away too much personal information about me. But let's just say that I was having a medical issue a few years ago, and everything was supposed to have been handled. It was a pretty big surgery, and I thought everything was fine. And then I got a message from my friend Dapper, and this message was actually from you. You asked Dapper to tell it to me. Basically, the gist of it was time to have a check. It was time for me to just go to the doctor and find out that everything is, if everything, let's just go to the doctor and get checked, basically. And when I got that message from Dapper, I didn't tell him anything at the time because I didn't want to bias him in any way. I just said like, "What kind of problem?" Right? Because the first one was it was just health in general, and I was like, "Well, what kind of health in general?" And then Dapper went back to you. He asked you a few specific questions. You came back, and you gave pretty specific answers. Like you identify the organ in the human body. As far as I'm aware, I had never posted anything about it anywhere. Somehow you knew what it was. And once I read that, I think I remember I went, "Ooh, okay, this is a little serious." And funnily enough, I was having some pain around those weeks, and I did go to the doctor, and the doctor did look at my results, and he said, "You know what? This deserves investigating." And then I was sent to have a CAT scan. So after he had sent me to have a CAT scan, I said to the doctor, "Doctor, now that you made your decision, right, and you made your prescription, and I'm not biasing you anymore, please let me show you this series of text messages here in my cell phone." And doctor is a good sport, he's not exactly my friend, but we get along really well. He saw my text messages, and then the hair on the back of his neck stood because they were pretty specific again. And then once he said the messages, he said, "You know what, Marco, I'm going to order additional tests now." Right? But he was just kidding, I think. And everything went well for everybody who is interested and following in the stream. Everything turned out fine. I'm okay. At least I hope so, right? I'm knocking on wood right now, and so far so good. But it's very eerie that you had that message. So TJ, I thought I would start with this little anecdote, and without getting into much details, because I don't want people in the world to know what exactly is wrong with me. But just tell me in general, how did it come to you? How did you know it was me? Was it just appeared in your head that you had to communicate this, or was it something else? Like, how did it all start?
hold on. Oh yeah, okay. So I've always been kind of like that, just slightly in tune with the world around me. Always have been.
Yeah.
And I was literally sitting on my back porch. I smoke. I use a vaporizer, and I had this very strong urge to tell Sean exactly what I told you, or
Right.
what I had him relate to that. And if it gets more specific, I
Yes.
relay exactly that. And there are times in my life where if I'm not allowed to say anything more specific, I'm blocked off from more specific
Oh,
instances. It's basically don't kill the messenger type thing.
I understand. And would you say that actual words form inside your head, or is it more like a general feeling, and then you have to interpret that in some way or another?
Audio and visual.
It's audio and visual.
Mhm.
So you actually get like I don't know. I don't want to call it a vision because that's a bit of a loaded word, vision. But
Yeah,
like,
it's
how would
more
you
like
describe it? Like, if you had to describe to me what exactly you see with your eyes, what would you describe it?
it's like looking at a kind of like looking down a tunnel and looking at pictures. Like, say, for instance, you're looking at a picture of the human anatomy, and then
Right.
you target that particular human anatomy area. Say, for instance, you're looking at a hand,
Yeah.
and you look at the fingertip,
Right.
and you'll see a piece of swelling on that fingertip where it's hurting.
Right.
Oh, and then you see, okay, that particular fingertip, it's going to be okay. It'll get maybe a little bit of infection there, but the infection will go away, and that is the message I'll get. That's the exact
Wow.
wording I'll get.
That is.
And that,
Yeah. Go ahead.
and that's the type of message that's the type of voice I'll hear too. And it's a very soft, soothing voice. Or say, for instance, it's going to get worse. That person's going to need antibiotics because that infection's not going to get better without help. Get them to the doctor as soon as possible.
So
That is the type
so
of infection I'll
uh,
get.
tell me a little bit more about the voices. Is it always the same voice? Like, is it a person? Is there a personality behind these messages that you're hearing, or is it like a different voice and it's not necessarily a person?
It's my higher self persona. It's that in tune with the world around me voice. How I've always visioned myself as another connected human being. We're all connected with the world around us, and every part of us has another extension to the universe, and that part speaks. And when we're connected to that aspect of who we are, it speaks to us and to that interconnectedness.
So there is so much there, and I was trying to listen to it. Are you saying this is a part of yourself, or is it an entity separate from yourself, the one that speaks to you?
It's a part of me, and it's a part of me that is connected to the rest of the world and the rest of the universe. You want to do this?
I
It's hard to explain. So.
that is amazing. I find this amazing. So look, now that we have introduced, some of what you have done, and I'm sure there are many other stories. What I like to do with my guests so far in this episode is to try to start as far in the beginning as possible, right? So maybe your earliest memories when you started to notice that perhaps you were more perceptive than other children, or that perhaps you were seeing things that others were not seeing, or you had certain, I don't know what to call them, messages that you didn't see other kids had, and therefore they couldn't be normal. How old were you when you started to notice you were different?
Looking back, I couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old because I was seeing things moving around. We lived in a small duplex
Yeah.
that was very old. It was probably built in the 1920s. Looking back on how it was built, knowing what I know now,
Yes.
and it had the shotgun house feel with a living room off to the side, and then my bedroom was right next to the living room. Then
Yeah. Go ahead.
at night, I would see a green fuzzy man, like he was made out of TV static, only the static part that was white is instead green. And I'd see him, He terrified me. So
Whoa. Who is him?
the green fuzzy man, I would see him constantly. Nobody else could. My mom couldn't. My dad couldn't.
So you're saying you were around 3 or 4 years old, right, when you started seeing him?
Hmm.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And obviously you told your parents. What did your parents say?
They didn't believe me because they couldn't see him. They couldn't feel him, but I
S-
could.
Did they say something like, "Don't worry about it. It's just imaginary," or "You're making it up"? I mean, I don't know what I would say to my children if they came to me and told me that they see a man that I cannot see. Honestly, I mean,
My mom was a believer in such things. So she was also very much kind of the hippie mindset too.
yeah,
So she was a believer, thankfully. She didn't doubt it. She just couldn't see him. She wasn't as in tune as she could have been, I think,
I
had
see.
she been a little bit more open. But she just couldn't see him. She'd outgrown that part of herself.
When did you stop seeing this green fuzzy man? When did you stop?
When we moved, when I was about four and a
Oh, I
half, we
see.
moved in with my grandma.
So it was tied to the house then.
Yeah. We moved
So
in to the house. I saw him. We moved out. I stopped seeing him.
so now that you have learned so much more, right, than you knew back then, what is your theory now as to what that person was?
He was the house protector. He must have passed on with that house, in that house, and he protected that house for
So
whatever reason.
sounds like a positive thing, right? Like a benevolent entity.
Hmm.
Is that right? Like he didn't mean harm to anyone.
Exactly. There were times when I'd find him in my bedroom,
Yeah.
standing inside my doorway, because there were other entities in that house that weren't so kind. I'd see shadows and other
Oh,
things, and they terrified me even more. And so I'd see the green man just kind of guarding the door, and whenever he would come in, they would vacate the room.
he protected you.
Yes.
What did the other entities look like?
Those were just shadow people, and they were horrifying. And I see those, when you're walking. Reno is not I call Reno a black hole. Reno is a very negative energy area. I don't like living here and never have.
Yeah,
So,
I understand. Reno, Nevada is
mhm,
not a fan.
exactly.
Not a fan. Describe to me. So when I hear the word shadow people, I imagine I imagine a humanoid person that has a head, two arms, and two legs, and is
Mhm.
just made of shadow. Is that about right? Like, what do they look like?
These particular shadows were people that they would kind of crawl up the wall and extend themselves up the wall.
Jesus.
And it was almost like they were going as if sunset were occurring when the sun had already been down for hours. And in this case, they would just creep up the wall and at my bed. And then that was when I would start seeing the green men come through my door with my door being shut.
Whew.
He would phase through the wall. Mhm.
I am reading up in Wikipedia. I don't know if you're watching this stream on your PC. There is a entry for shadow person in
Mhm.
Wikipedia. One possible, obviously, people in Wikipedia will try to come up with any scientific explanation, if any. And I don't
I hope they
necessarily
do.
fight that, right? Like, I mean, if there is a scientific explanation, then please, right? I'll take it.
Mhm.
But what I'm reading here, I don't think it applies. The first sentence, it says, uh, sleep paralysis, right? And I have experienced sleep paralysis. It
Mhm.
happens when you sleep, right?
Exactly. It
So
doesn't
so
help
that's
if you're
not the
not
case for
asleep.
you, right?
It
So
does.
that's ruled out. Methamphetamine addicts, so that's ruled out. You're 4 years old. That's way too young,
Mhm.
right?
And
And that's it. That's the end of that paragraph. Scientific explanations. So, what is your theory about shadow people? What do you think they actually are?
I like to think that maybe they have been either people who were negatively influenced by life and then carried on that baggage and weight with their lives, or they were the unfortunate souls that died a heavy death. And that's what breaks my heart about them. And then they got stuck at home and are homebound spirits. And
I
those are the
see.
people I don't like thinking about because it kind of breaks my heart to think about how they must exist or they are darker entities.
I've always wondered, if there was spiritual entities, I've always wondered, can they think? Are they
Mhm.
aware of what they are? Because if they are, right, if they can think and if they know that they are aware, it must be terrifying. It must be horrible to live in a world where there are clearly unfinished business that are, attaching you to it or tying you to it, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do because people don't see you, people don't hear you, you cannot touch them, and you're just there. You're just witnessing, unable to do anything. It must be the most frustrating feeling ever, I think.
I think some can. I think others cannot. It depends upon their level of energy, just as much as human beings can.
Ha-
But
have you
can do without a
ever
brain.
have you ever had any experience with any spiritual entity that could actually interact with our real world in any way? In any way, sights, sounds, things that can be felt.
Mm-hmm.
So
When we moved into my grandmother's house,
tell us about it. Tell us about it. Well, how did that go?
I was 4 to 6 to 7, somewhere in there. It's hard to remember which age we moved. I was 7, distinctly 7, because I turned 8 at the new house when my parents bought the house.
Right,
So this was in Phoenix, Arizona. And my grandmother she had built this house in phases, so it had an odd layout. My grandmother's bedroom was in the far right, as kind of a ranch style house.
right.
And then my bedroom was right next to hers, and then the bathroom was right across the hallway. My parents' house was on the other, or my parents' bedroom was on the far other side of the house, on the other side of the kitchen and the living room.
Okay.
So about 40 feet difference.
So pretty far from the other two.
Hmm. So one night I hear what I thought at first was my grandmother talking, but she was out
And
of town in Germany.
again, you're around 7, 8 at this time, right?
About 4 to 5 at this point.
4 to 5. Okay.
She
So
was visiting my uncle and aunt and my new cousin, who was just a baby in Germany. My uncle was stationed overseas. He was
right,
Navy. So I heard my grandmother asking me, TJ, what's your home phone number? I don't normally talk in my sleep, never have. I wake up, sit up, and respond to her. And I recite to her the home
okay,
phone number.
right,
She asked me, what's the address? I tell her what the address is.
right.
And she said, okay, good. You did good there. Go back to sleep. This is a woman's voice. Then I go a couple days later. My dad comes in. My dad was never a small man. He was very large all his life,
Right.
uh, pushing about 300 pounds
Oh,
all his life. So very, very large and six
right,
foot.
right. Big.
Well, yeah. Well, he comes in and wakes me up and says, TJ, it's time for you to go to school. The sun is still not up. He normally doesn't wake me up before sunrise. I get up, take a shower, get dressed, no problems. And I realize the sun's not up. That's odd. I go and sit on the sofa. I look into the dining room, and their door is still shut. The light is not on. And I peek in and go, Dad, why are you in bed? You got to get me to school. He goes, TJ, it is 3 o'clock in the morning. Why are you
Whoa,
awake?
whoa.
You told me to wake up, and I just gave you a hug when I went to go get a shower. He's like, TJ, my bedroom door's been locked. Why are you up? Go back to bed. I had
That.
ducked underneath his arm and touched him and gave him a hug. And
Wow.
that had happened 2 days prior.
But this is so strange. Clearly, it's not a ghost. He's alive, just in a different bedroom.
And
So,
my dad took up the entire door frame to my bedroom door. I couldn't have walked past him.
right, right, impossible. So, what was it, right? Not a ghost, right? Real person is alive, different bedroom, but
It should
clearly
also be
something
noted my
physical.
mom's My mom's father passed away in that house, and her her great aunt had come to visit, and apparently a few days later had passed on after she returned home, and sounded very
Oh,
much like my grandmother.
oh, I
I
see.
didn't find that out until several years later.
I see. I see. But there is a detail here that gives me a little bit of hope. So remember how earlier I was saying that I hope entities are not really aware of what's going on
Mhm.
because it would be so frustrating. So
Mhm.
I think that it's actually a good thing that the message you got at 3 a.m. in the morning was relatively ordinary, right? Get up and go to school. That's not a message you give if you are an incredibly frustrated spirit who cannot communicate and is, condemned to an eternity of just watching people go by without seeing you. That's not what you would say. You would say something like, "Please notice me. This existence is terrible. I need help." You wouldn't say, "Get dressed and get ready to go to school."
Exactly right. And I always thought maybe it was because my grandfather was a teacher and he was going, this is my granddaughter and I want her to be successful. And
Right,
so I think that was a little heartwarming in his
right.
ideology there. And he just had his times wrong. And maybe he was also baking for a little bit of attention. He never got
Right.
a chance to meet me. I was the first grandchild born without having met me.
I see. I see. That makes more sense, and that is a little bit more heartwarming. I mean, in previous podcasts that Sean and I and other guests, we have explored this idea that these spiritual entities, some of them seem to be living a moment in sort of endless loop, kind of like Groundhog Day for some of them. And they may have limited interaction. It's almost like when you are in a dream and you don't know that you are dreaming. So you take certain decisions and you make certain actions that if you looked at them from afar, within context, you would say, well, this doesn't make any sense. But within the context of the dream, it sort of makes temporal sense, so to speak, and you act without realizing that you are actually inside a dream, and what you're doing doesn't make sense in the larger context. So maybe that's what these spiritual entities are doing. Maybe they are sort of like in a dream, and they're doing what feels right at the moment without necessarily seeing the big picture where we all live.
I think some do, but some don't. I think it depends upon their goals as people at the time of their passing and their intent and what their day to day lives may have been, as well as who they were as people themselves.
uh,
When you look at, say, for instance, somebody who's really ingrained in their habits,
right.
they tend to go through their mundane lives day to day, very much in a habit. I'm one of those very much. This is my day to day. I do this day to day on autopilot some days, almost completely with the exception of work and then handling whatever Luma needs to do. No, if somebody else is very much like that, they may walk through their afterlife stuck in whatever place they may be, walking through a dream, and it may become very frustrating through them because they're not getting the interactions they need to move on. My go-to is
I see.
and other people, other entities may also have a lot of intent, a lot of energy behind them that they can interact very strongly
S-
with the world around them now.
I see. I see. So do you think the energy level is related to how much they care about a certain thing? Like somebody who
Oh,
is
easily.
very intense, right, and he really needed to get X task done, then that person is likely to have a higher energy level than someone who was, less intense. You think that could be it?
Energy level as well as their individual thought process. A person who
Ah,
may or may not be an intense person
right.
may be a easier person to get along with in the afterlife or may not be. They may be a more driven person to get to the afterlife itself. They may not get stuck. It really does depend upon their
I see.
circumstances as to why they are still here or not.
So
Why are they here still?
there is this theory, right? So Sean and I have been kicking it around in previous episodes. It has to do with the concept of belief. and the concept of a ritual. Right, so Three Kings is a subreddit for rituals. People go to Three Kings and they learn the steps on how to perform something that presumably has some paranormal effects or consequences. And by performing those steps, they obtain those consequences. And Sean and I have talked like maybe it's not so much about the steps, maybe it's about the belief that you put in the effects, which is manifested in you doing the steps. In other words, if you didn't actually think that you could hear certain words or messages with Three Kings, to give an example, then you wouldn't bother to wake up at 3 in the morning and set up two chairs with two giant mirrors and a candle and the fan and just sit there. The fact that you're putting all that effort and the fact that you are doing all of that, belief, again, that's the key word, is actually what gives these entities energy, right? So I don't know how that jives. I mean, what do you think with what we were saying before? We were saying it depends on the intensity and the kind of mentality that these entities had in life, and maybe a third factor is like how much do we believe in them from the outside, whether through a ritual or any other form.
That is a really good point. Organic and how things occur organically for me
Yeah,
seems to work best whenever I do a ritual, whenever I'm trying to force it,
yeah.
it seems to backfire for me. Now,
Ah,
if I let things happen organically, just natively, say
yeah,
if I really want something to happen, I just tend to put energy through it naturally and just go, okay, I really want this to happen. And I just kind of will it slowly and put passive, constant, slow energy to it. Like I'm working really hard toward this goal. And
right.
it's just that constant push, constant, 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 constant. It happens. If I try to push it all at once, it backfires. For me, that seems to work
That
best.
seems to
That
work
is my
best.
level of thinking.
So, let me go back to to your childhood and your teenage years. I mean, obviously, at some point you noticed that you were different from other people your same age because you had different perceptions. Eventually, you started to learn that there is such a thing as occult knowledge, and there is such a
Mhm.
thing as rituals, and there is such a thing. I don't know if I want to use the word magic here, but you started to learn that there is more. That is not just you, right? So
Right.
at that point in your life, do you take active steps to join any sort of organization, to take any sort of training, to learn any sort of specialized knowledge, basically develop your abilities in any way? Did that ever happen?
I started reading as much as I possibly could whenever I possibly could. Every book I could get my hands on.
Yeah,
Then I started reading internet channels, internet forums, internet websites. Some of my favorites, looking back, I was really into paganism. Then I started
mm,
going through, I don't try to name books in
right.
general, just because I've read too many of them.
Okay,
But then I really started realizing that pretty much the more you read, the better off you are. And I also started studying philosophy. In fact, I majored in philosophy as well as psychology.
ah,
And so I did both.
wow, wow.
And then I had a minor in theology with it.
So you are gathering all this knowledge, right,
Mhm.
from books, and I'm sure you read books that said a certain thing is a certain way, and then a different book says no, it's actually this different way, and now you have to sort of reconciliate the two differing opinions. So my question is, do you feel that at any point you applied that knowledge, like you did something that you learned from a book or from anywhere in these, occult sources of knowledge, and it actually worked and it had an effect, and you felt that all your effort had been, worthwhile to create that effect?
Always, because when you apply energy with a positive intent, it can work. It just has to do with the intent itself. And like I said, for me, what works best is the slow, steady pressure. I think it
Right,
has to do with what works best for the individual.
right,
For
right, right,
me,
right.
I'm one of those, I'm kind of like a turtle.
Yeah,
Slow,
no, I
steady
get it. So
pressure.
yeah, yeah, it wins the race. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. So what was the next thing that happened to you? So you have told us a few stories already. What is the next thing that happened to you that is definitely paranormal, that there is really no other explanation for it, that at least science would acknowledge as you were growing up?
The first, well, there have been many, but the first thing that actually comes to mind, I was with a group of people.
Yeah,
And so this happened to a group of people that were all fairly close to me.
yeah,
And we were in a job corps at the time. So we were going from the little corner mart, which is about a mile down the road, back to job corps. Then we went the longer route, just taking the scenic route. So it ended up being closer to 2 miles. This is actually in Stead, which tends to be a longer, windier route.
right.
It's said to be on native ground, which most of Reno and Stead actually are. They're part of the Paiute Reservation. So we all
Mm,
have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt, too. And I do. I'll go, okay.
okay.
No, with that in mind, it was close to 95 degrees out that day. It was middle of the summer. It was 85 degrees still. Walking down that road in the middle of summer, we all started getting chills for no reason. My boyfriend at the
Weird.
time, exactly. My boyfriend at the time, he started shivering. He's like, "Why is it so cold?" Another
Yeah.
friend of ours said,
Chills
"Yeah,
in
why?"
Reno in the summer. Holy crap. Okay.
Yeah, he was like, his friend went, "Yeah, it is kind of oddly chilly, but yeah, whatever."
Yeah.
And we all going, that is kind of odd. Then we were going along, and I started going, it is odd, but whatever. I start getting goosebumps. At the
Right.
time, it took a lot for me. I used to weigh over 300 pounds.
Right.
It took a lot for me to get cold. We were
I have
walking.
heard before that sometimes that happens when the spiritual entity kind of like sucks energy from the environment, therefore leaving it cold. That's what I've heard before.
Exactly. Now, this is in the middle of a huge rolling field. I start seeing just mentally just images
Yeah.
of a large battle between two tribes, just mentally seeing images of it. And
Wow.
I look over to my boyfriend, I'm telling him what I'm seeing. He's like, oh, that's creepy. He's like, that you can't, we're just going to brush that off.
Yeah, no, that's
And
that's crazy. So native tribes, so a fight between native tribes, like you saw, people with, I don't know, whatever weapons they had at the time, just going at each other on the grass.
yeah,
Wow.
and I start describing it in pretty deep detail. I was seeing one guy laying on the side next to me where he is being pretty much just hacked up, and it made
Jesus.
me want to vomit. Another one, he had taken an arrow to the shoulder and it had pierced upward through his neck into his jaw. It was pretty horrific and graphic.
And could you tell the difference between the real world and the vision in any
It
way?
was like, oh yeah, it was like seeing two different realities layered on top of each other. And that's generally when those types of things happen. It's like walking between two worlds at the same time.
Just for a minute.
Is it one of those
One
things
minute.
where
We're not gonna.
the
No,
vision is
no, no, no. I'm
semi-transparent? I
gonna
mean, I
take.
don't know how this works.
Talk.
Is it, or is it more like you have the
I'm gonna
sensation that
fix the world. I am
it
this
is there, and
man.
if you focus
And
on
bam,
one,
bam.
it becomes solid, and if you focus on the other one fades away?
It's always the reality is reality, as
Yeah.
in I know where I am physically and mentally, and then I see and experience simultaneously the secondary reality of the past or what
Wow.
is possible to be. In the future, if it is going to happen, it might happen. And
Wow.
with this in case, Herman was kind of mind blown. It's like, if this ever happened, that is pretty creepy.
That is
And
amazing. Did you hear any
so
sounds too, or was it just visuals?
it's a little bit of screaming off in the distance, but it was just to me, I don't know if it was ever real or not, but
It
I like to
was.
think that it's a possibility that we walked into kind of a replay of maybe the anniversary
I see.
of this
How did he react? I
battle.
mean, here you are walking in what otherwise looks like a ordinary field, an ordinary place. Suddenly, you start telling him, massive battle and guys hacked up and with arrows up their jaw. How did he believe you? How did he react?
Considering he was Micmac and Puerto Rican,
Okay.
he was horrified. The
Oh,
way
he
he was
believed you.
raised,
Oh
he
wow.
was very amazed. Then Jason started going, "Oh wow!" He started listening, and he's like, "Oh my, oh wow, why are you saying this?" And he's like, "This is what she's seeing in her head. She's always been the weird one." And so then he started really listening. He's like, "I don't think she's seeing this, isn't she?" He was also very profoundly pagan. And then other friends of ours that were walking in front of us turned
Yeah.
around. They're about 25 feet ahead of us. And it's like Rick came up to us and said, "It is freezing out here. Why am I so cold?" And
Yeah.
Brianna came up to us and she was shivering. She was literally covered in goosebumps. And she's like, "Yeah, I am so cold. We've got to hurry back, guys. You guys got to stop dawdling." So we tried to book it home as quickly as we could. There's all total of us, 5 of us, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Jason, Herman, Brianna, Richard. We were all sitting there just shivering in 80-degree weather.
That is
And
that is
I'm sitting here describing this whole scenario as we're passing through this large field cut between the road.
So here's what I kind of want to do. I don't want to do it right now on the stream, right? Because it's too details. But later, I am very curious. Is it possible to use the internet to find out if any battle happened there? Right? Like I don't want you to give me coordinates or any details right now. But have you ever looked? Have you ever checked to see if a battle actually took place on that area?
I haven't. That's an excellent question. I'll have to.
I mean, we have the internet. Is how cool would it be? I mean, cool is probably not the right word, but just
You're
imagine how
right.
fascinating it will be if you
You're right.
actually, Google a certain location and Wikipedia comes up and yeah, the battle of blah 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 happened here, and
Yeah.
you know,
I'll have to look up this.
I always try to think of that angle. I always try to think of like, is there anything in particular, for instance, when you saw that person lying on the ground with an arrow up his jaw, did he have anything specific about him? Any unique clothing or unique painting or unique, I don't know, some identifier that if we were to take it to a historian, he would go, "Oh yeah, that's the blah 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 tribe. Yeah, that's their typical symbol." I mean, to me, that would be an amazing confirmation. It would blow my mind if that kind of thing happened.
I agree. And so, with that in mind, I just asked Sean for a pen and paper so I could write that down so I remember to look.
Oh, good, good, good. And if you do find it, please let us know. We will do a
Not a
follow up.
problem.
So,
Right from the chair.
so what else has happened? I mean, keep telling us about your life. Your life continued, and I think at some point in your story, Sean mentioned something having to do with aliens.
Oh, that's been going on my life.
Tell us
Oh,
about it, if you don't mind.
oh, that one immediately sent shivers right down my spine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the first time I remember it, I hate to say it, but I was like 6 months old the first time I actually remember.
Oh my
And
God.
I know people say you can't remember being 6 months old. I know that for a fact. And physiologically speaking,
Yeah.
we aren't capable of remembering being 6 months old. But in this case, I have two distinct memories of being that age. One, my mom was feeding me.
Yeah.
Two, I remember being in bed, waking up in my crib, looking up, and there are faces surrounding me that aren't human.
Oh my
And
God.
then being picked up and then coming to in an area that is not my home and nowhere else I remember, and it is completely white. And that's where it ends.
What do you remember their faces? Do you remember what did they look like?
Fairly standard gray aliens the first time, but they're a little bit off from what we consider standard. Their eyes are more blue, which always bugged me in how we draw gray aliens because they have blue eyes. And that one was always weird to me. is why we draw gray aliens with any other color, like big black eyes, and they make these odd clicking sounds. Have you ever seen the movie Signs?
I have. I remember it.
Okay,
Yes.
so that weird clicking sound is almost correct, only they add more growls behind it at times. It
Yeah.
sounds kind of right
I
from what I remember, and that one always bugged me. That movie terrified me for ages. So does Christopher Walken because his eyes remind me of aliens. He
huh.
absolutely terrifies me because of his eye color.
So let me ask you a different question. Probably a question they haven't asked you before, because you just told us that your first memory of these creatures is when you were 6 months. What I'm gonna ask you is, what is your first memory of remembering them? Right? Like, how old were you when you first told that story about being 6 months old and being picked up?
When I was 23.
So, at age 23, do you think it's possible you had been exposed to anything, to I don't know, a movie or pictures, art, anything at all that could have possibly influenced you at age 23?
I've been exposed repeatedly, clearly. Now, I've been saying these types of things all of my life beforehand.
So,
I remember distinctly beforehand,
yeah.
well before that, seeing them, trying to explain to my mom what I had been seeing and having come through my window, why the dogs at times would not come into my bedroom until well after I'd woken up at night. And at times they would just start freaking out at night and she couldn't figure out why. Things
Uh,
like
if you had to guess, about how many times have you had this experience happen over the course of your life?
that. I can't count that high or off
Really?
the
So,
bat.
is are we talking like dozens, hundreds, probably?
Hundreds, if I'd have to say so, especially considering I've moved probably around 30 times and they found me every time. It stopped since I was, well, since around the time I've had Lumen. It's, if that, if they've stopped or if they've slowed down since I've had her, I'm wondering if maybe she was just a purpose. They wanted me to be able to have her. I think she may have been just our gift for her, as in we were meant to have her.
Every time that this experience happened, was it roughly the same? Was it roughly like you're laying down, you see them around you, they pick you up, then you wake up in your bed? Is it always the same, or the different things happen at different times?
Sometimes they would just do a checkup. Other times they would take me. Other times they would just kind of peer in at me and go, okay, you're here. They would point some little tool that they had in their hand at me. And then that's the last thing I remember.
Uh,
Other times I would wake up, look at them. I would hear a couple clicks and that would be it. Most of the time I would wake up on the table, so to speak,
yeah.
and then I'd be put back down.
I have heard a lot of experiences. Preparing for this show, I went to YouTube and I just watched a bunch of videos about people who have had similar experiences. A common pattern seems to be some sort of anesthesia or some sort of, I don't know, blackout procedure that prevents the people from remembering entire chunks of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of them remember nothing, some of them remember a few flashes, but
Mm-hmm.
most of the times it's like going through surgery, right? You're laying on the bed, you see the anesthesiologist on top of you, and he says, "Good night, sir," and whoop, next thing you know, you're in the recovery room. So there is a lot of theories that what actually happens in these blocks of time has to do with some sort of research, some people say. Others say that they are, I don't know, analyzing or implanting what you have specifically done with your life and your body up until that point. So, do you have any theory as to why you and what are they doing to you?
I do.
So, I
Again,
mean,
I've
if you
been
feel free to tell us, yeah, as long as you're comfortable telling us, we would love to hear it.
I have been a little bit odd all of my life.
Yeah.
all of it. I've been a migrainer. I'm kind of in tune to the world around me. I know that, and that's not me being vain. That's just going, okay, the world is unique
Yeah.
in the fact that we as human beings, and there's life on the planet when there's no life in any of the other planets that's unique.
Right.
Why else would we visit there? And so they're trying to find other creatures that acknowledge that. So they're probably trying to study us rather.
I see.
I have migraines. I also have epilepsy. My brain is not neurotypical. So they may be trying to figure out why it's
I
not neurotypical.
see.
What sets me apart?
Like, if I had to think of an analogy, I think I would go for somebody who is like a biologist, right? And he travels to this distant island because this is the only island that has this particular species of bird or whatever, turtle, I don't know, just something unique there that is far away but is worth going to. And the biologist is going to investigate it. And then he finds this unique specimen that is unlike all the others, right? So a real life biologist would tag that specimen and would make periodic visits just to see how it's doing and how it's compared to the control population. So,
Exactly.
so no, maybe there's something like that. The when was the last time that you experienced anything like this? What year was it, if you remember?
The year Lumen was born.
So,
That's when I remember that I remember anyway. Now I just because the medications I'm on, I sleep kind of like the living dead.
okay,
I do. And she and I were.
so around
I had her in the
2010 or
bed with me.
something like that. We're thinking.
2012.
Yeah. Okay.
She and I were sleeping in the bed. I had her co-sleeping.
Right.
She was completely sound asleep. She slept through the night very early at about 2 months old. I had her sleeping in the bed with me. I had her in her little crib thing.
Yeah.
And I hear the cats, all three of them, come screaming into the bedroom, and they all hide underneath her actual big crib.
Oh.
And they're cowering. They're terrified. I've
Okay.
never seen all three of them together because two out of the three hated the other one.
Yeah.
They
If
couldn't
something
stand
puts
her.
them together, like they have a common foe out there. Okay.
Yeah. And then all the lights dim because I always slept with the nightlight on. I don't like the dark. It freaks me out.
Yeah.
And then the lights in the house just kind of dim down but don't go out like a brownout. Well, I look up and there's a small gray, not a large one, not like the 6 feet tall ones, but the small one standing in the hallway. And I hear a click, and that's it.
Uh, Pause 1 second before the click. What's going on through your mind? You recognize the gray, and you think what? You think here we go again. You think what goes through your mind?
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
It's more of a resignation at this point.
I see. I see. So it sounds like you definitely don't like it. This is not at all a pleasant thing that you do. This is not, and I want to clarify to everyone in the podcast, this is not something like you exactly volunteered to do it. Sean explained to me, that this is something that's happened and I can ask about it, but it's not like you're out there declaring to the world, hey, look at me, right? It's not something that you are particularly happy about, it sounds like. Is that right?
They terrify me. They
Yeah.
really do. I imagine how an animal must feel being caged and poked and prodded whenever
Yeah.
we do that to them, as you said, marine biologists must do to a fish.
Right. Right. Right.
I really do
Jesus.
feel for those animals.
Here's a thought. I always try to bring an angle of ultimately what I want for Three Kings and for just the paranormal community in general. What I want is to start to make advances that takes things out of the realm of the completely unknown and completely occult, and maybe little by little we start to just push them into this could be science one day. This could be verified one day. This could be something that gets studied in universities one day, and we create technology based on it. So that's my intent. And when I think of this scenario, what comes to mind is actually a Wi-Fi doorbell or a Wi-Fi camera. So these are things that is a little camera, is placed anywhere you want in the house. It is continuously streaming into the cloud, right? It goes to a Google server farm somewhere, right? And it's continuously replicated there. If anything, God forbid, I don't want anything to happen, but God forbid, if anything were to happen in the future, at least you would have a video of it. So I don't
That
know
would
if
be
you would consider
amazing.
that. Yeah. And they're super cheap. You can buy one for like, I don't know. I don't know how much they cost. I don't want to advertise them, but I know that they record 24/7, and I know that everything they record goes either to your computer or to the cloud, and you can just review it every time. And how would that make you feel? Would that give you closure if you were to see a video of it actually happen, or would it make you freak out even more? Would it make you scared? What do you think your reaction would be if you had actual video evidence of this thing that's been going on?
It could be useful.
Yeah.
It could be absolutely fascinating as far as studying them right back. And I'm a firm believer in the idea that there's nothing supernatural in the world. We just haven't figured it out yet.
Yes. Yes.
My whole idea and worry about that is the electromagnetic field that they seem to produce, and that this has been tried before.
Oh, I see. They
So
would break
we'd have to
the
work at that.
camera. You would get
Or
static.
potentially. Now, if we can find a way around that,
Oh,
we
I'm
can
sure
work
we
with it.
could. I'm sure we
We can work
could.
around that.
That's
It's
what I
perfectly
would
possible.
love to see. I mean, human ingenuity is truly a wonder. Is real magic by itself. What
Mhm.
humans can do once they set their minds to it. So I wish someone somewhere would try to figure out how to get a camera to survive this EMP effect. Like I can think already like of 300 ideas. Like for instance, you put the camera really far away and you give it a lens, a telescopic lens. Done. Right? Well, of course, that's not going to capture you everything 24/7, so there's new problems. But
Actually,
yeah,
that may be exactly what needs to happen.
yeah, yeah, as long as
So,
it has good line of sight, right? But in theory, right, if it's far away and it has a telescopic lens, then it just captures it and the EMP doesn't
yeah,
reach it.
exactly. So put it through, say, a neighbor's door
Yeah,
and push it through.
something like that. And you don't need, I mean, you don't need like HD footage. Like some things are weird enough that even if you get something close to it, is very good proof. And I think
Exactly.
something like that could really revolutionize a lot of our understanding, right? Because when I look sometimes at the news and I look at the world today, I understand it, but I think of myself, if I was from outside of Earth, I would look at all these Earthlings fighting amongst themselves, and I would kind of feel bad. I would kind of feel the way biologists feel when they go to these tiny islands and they see flocks of birds attacking each other, if that ever happens, right? And
Exactly.
if the birds knew that there is a biologist observing them, how would they, if they could process that, if they had the sentience to understand that? We certainly do. We have sentience. And if suddenly came out in the news that we're not alone in the universe and that there is something else out there, I wonder what the effect would be. I wonder if it would be unifying and maybe we would start to forget a little bit these artificial differences between us. I don't know.
I think it would be for some people, and for others, it would be cause for division. It
Mm,
depends upon the personality. We have so many personality types. Other people are more prone to fear, and other people are more prone to love.
yes.
So we have to tread with caution with people as we stand. Currently, we are more prone to fear right now. So we need to
Yes.
wait more toward a time of peace
Yes. Yes, I
before that can
agree
be real. I think the
completely.
announcement's already there.
I think there are two great motivators in life, and it's not love and hate, it's love and fear, actually,
Mhm.
right? You
Mhm.
do something either out of love because you want to produce a positive effect in the world and just have a happy impact in the universe, or you do something out of fear because there is
Mhm.
something negative that you don't want and that's motivating you to act. And that second kind seems more pervasive lately, and I think is not as effective and is not as good, obviously, as the first.
Yes.
So let
Correct.
me ask you a question. We only have a few minutes left, but imagine, optimistically that there is somebody listening to this podcast who is perhaps very young and is perhaps experiencing some of these things that you were experiencing where you were very young, right? And as you were, they are having difficulties expressing themselves, just like your parents told you that they couldn't see the green fuzzy man. Maybe there are people right now who are feeling the same way. They are not being understood or they are not being heard, but they know what their experience is and they know that they're seeing some stuff that shouldn't be seeing. So if those persons were listening, what is the advice that you would give them? What is the kind of things that you think they should know that would have helped you knowing if you heard them, when you were much younger?
It's okay to have doubt. It's okay to then do the research and to have faith
Mm,
in something different. Just because it's different doesn't make it wrong. It makes
right,
it unique and beautiful.
right,
It makes it sometimes scary. It makes it sometimes way different from what you're used to, but it
right,
doesn't make it bad.
right,
And it's okay to explore it and do the research.
right.
Pick up books. Go for the different items on the shelf
Yeah,
that may hold that answer.
I think that's a very good message. I think people get locked up by fear sometimes, right? Especially if they're young, and you tell
Mhm.
them, no, 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 this topic is forbidden, and you're not supposed to explore it, or you're not supposed to think about it. And if you do, that makes you a bad person, and that closes a lot of doors, I think.
True.
So I think the opposite feels more healthy. Like, okay, this weird thing happened to you. We don't understand it, but that's okay. We're gonna explore it. We're gonna figure it out one day. We're gonna keep going at it, and one day we'll get it right. And in the meanwhile, it's not your fault. You're not wrong. Is you're not being punished. We're just gonna have to figure out this weird thing that happened. That's kind of like the advice I would give.
And have fun trying to explore the differences between yourself and other people and
Yeah.
other instances. I mean,
Yes.
even with my rather profound fear of, for instance, the alien issue, it terrifies me to a very deep extent.
Yeah.
I had to have fun with it, going, okay, yeah, they're little weird green alien things. They're not really green, but yeah, I
Yeah.
have to make fun of it.
I see.
Bring levity to the situation. Have fun with it, because if you don't, you're never going to conquer your fears.
Right. Right. And
Have
you know
fun with
what?
it.
I don't know. I mean, this is a crazy world. I don't know if 5 years
Mhm,
from now, 10 years from now, all of these things will be confirmed. And,
mhm.
and
I
and I
hope
would
so.
love to see your reaction when that day comes. Maybe you'll be like, "Yep, I knew it all along. Glad everybody else is on board now."
And that'll be fun. Be like, okay, good. I'm
Yeah,
so glad. And everybody else that has ever experienced anything, any kind of ghost issue, any kind of alien issue, any kind of just
yeah,
interesting paranormal thing that occurs in the world. We'll all go, there we go. We finally have confirmation. Wonderful. I
that
look forward to that day.
that is a great TJ. That is a great message. That is all I hope for. That is all I hope for this subreddit. That is all I hope for the podcast and for everyone I talk to. That one day we'll just get to a better understanding of this fantastic and fascinating and mysterious and massive world that we're not even close to understanding, not even a little bit. Right? So there is a lot of out there, folks. There is many things out there. TJ, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest. Any last things you'd like to say to anybody listening? I think you already
I,
did.
I just hope everybody has a wonderful night.
Have a wonderful night, people. Everybody, thank you so much. And we'll see you again in one week in the next episode of the Three Kings podcast. Have a good day.